as you remember, the first thing that we are supposed to do in the assigned lab exercise is that we are given some HTML code, and we are given this picture that the output of our code should be laid out as this picture. Okay, so we'll notice a few things in the picture while we are doing, modifying the CSS part of the code to make our output look like this. So if you look at the code that was given to you, it's just simple HTML code with, a form, a simple form, and some, H2 with the title of the form. So if we look at the output of this, if we just go and check out the output of this part, you will see that it's a plain old form, which is, I'm going to take this out and then, put it over here, this at the end, that we can see the output. Okay, so you can see that this is the output of the page. Now, what we want to do right now is we want to make sure that whatever we are getting, this output, what the output is shown over here, we want to make sure that it is converted into what it looks like in the picture. You have been given in the, if you look at the exercise lab manual, you can see that some of the hints are given to you because these are measurements. So you may follow them. But when you are designing your own, you can design your own measurements. So this is given so that it will make your life easier when you are doing it, so that you don't have to guess the measurements, what is shown in the picture. So, but when you are making your own layout, you don't follow these instructions. You have your own color scheme. You have your everything that you do is based on whatever you chose. But you have to learn some concept, like how do we center the element, or how do we align them? How do we use Flexbox in over here? Okay, so let's start that concept first. So what I'm going to do is I have the style over here, and I'm going to start writing my styles. Now you can see that the body part of my code is wrapped inside a div tag, which is the wrapper. Now there are reasons why I'm using the wrapper, but you may not, if you don't want to use it in this case, you can avoid it, which we'll see in the next class exercise. Okay, so but today one of the most common ways to work with a layout is to make sure that everything is wrapped neatly inside a wrapper. So this was like how people used to write their code, because it looks neater. You can center them, as you saw when we were discussing about floats and centered layout. So what we are going to do today is, first of all, if you remember, the first thing that we want to do, don't worry about styling the contents and everything first. First, you need to make sure that you are able to do step by step. So we always start with the topmost part, which is the wrapper. Here, the wrapper is the outline of the page. It's the width of the page. The whole page is inside a wrapper. This one is the form. So what we need to do first is see that what should be the height and width of my page. Now, usually, since it's the wrapper, it's a div tag, we know the width will be complete page, right? That's why you can see that the width will be of the wrapper will be starting from here until this end of the page. Now, we need to set the height, because the element can only be centered if it knows the height and width of the page. The width, as we know, is it takes into consideration the complete width, but the height is not set. So that's why you see something like this. After some time, you'll also see it like this. So how do we know the size of the page? Because, the user's browser can be anything. It can be a big screen. It can be a small screen. It can be a laptop screen. So how do we know the width of the screen? Now, when CSS people were introduced to this problem, they came up with a solution to say, okay, we can do something like this. We can go and say, let's say, since we are talking about the wrapper, which is a class, so I'm saying dot wrapper. And then here inside this, I would simply say body, I would simply say width. Okay. And then I would put, or not width, I'd put height. Okay. To be, let's say, 100%. Okay. So 100%. Now, in this one, usually we specify min height, not height, because this is the minimum one. You cannot go reduce it more than this one. So this is the minimum height. Okay. And then 100%. 100% means it should include the whole page. It should include the height and width of whatever is shown here. Now, this one works only when we are working with the body. If we have this body over here, the 100%. Okay. Now, this is not written in any book. This is something that I I found on Stack Overflow, because we were facing problems and tried to find solutions. And 100% works only when this is body or HTML. So, and we will see that in the next exercise in the next class. But we don't want this. We want the wrapper to be the whole width and height of the page. So whenever you are using any other HTML element and we want it to include the height and width of the whole page, we don't say 100%. We use a new unit which was introduced, which is called VH. It's called viewport height. So 100 means the full viewport height. So which is this one. Viewport means whatever is shown on the screen is called the viewport. So your viewport size will be smaller when you are working with a mobile phone. If you're working with a tablet, your viewport size is a little bigger. If you're working with a laptop, your viewport size is a little bigger. And there are two units, viewport height and viewport width. We are not concerned about width over here. We are more concerned about the height, because the width will be the complete size of the page, because it's a div element. So that's why I gave this explanation over here. When we want the wrapper to cover the whole height and width of the page, we usually give it a min height of 100 VH. VH stands for viewport height, which is the size of your screen. Okay, so here we only say height. Again, why do we use only height? The reason we use only height is because it's a div element and it will cover the whole width by default. So that's why we just want the height over here. Okay, so that's the first thing. It will not make much difference if you see everything, it looks the same as before, because we have not started styling it right now. Now the other thing that I want, you see this box, the wrapper. Now inside the wrapper, I have just one element. If you look at the code inside the wrapper, I just have one element, which is the form. And this one element is in the center. So what I need to do is to make the wrapper as my flex container. So if the wrapper is my flex container, all the items inside it, I can make them move as I like. You remember the properties? Justify content or align items or align content. All of this will work only when I make the wrapper as the container. So I can move the item, which is the form, anywhere I like. Because here you see what I want in the output is to move the form in the center of the page. How can I move something in the center of the page? Only if I can make the whole box, the container, as the whole box, the whole wrapper as my container. So if it becomes flex container, I can apply flex properties to it. So that's why the first thing I would do is to make this display flex. Okay. Now you can see nothing will change again, because flex by it's one item only. And flex by default is usually starts from the left hand side and from the top here. So it will stay here. So nothing will change much. So I need to start working with this to move it in the center over here, right? So I need to, for example, move it by using different properties. If you remember, when we were learning about Flexbox, we have two things, right? We have the main axis, which is this one. I can move it here, I can move it in the center, I can move it on the right. And then we have the cross axis, which I can move it here, I can move it in the center or move it over here. The first thing I want is I want to move it in the center. In what? In the cross axis. Now, the first thing that I have to do before I can start doing it is this box over here is supposed to have some width. But again, let's do it later on. So what I do is I'll probably go over here and say, justify content. Now this is the property that we use whenever we want to move something on the main axis. And then we would say justify content and let's say in the center. Okay. And you can see that the item moved in the center. Now the only thing remaining is to move it down here in the center. And the property that we use to move it on the cross axis in the center, that property is called as align items. Align items will move it again in the center. And you will see that everything is moved in the center. Okay, so we have two properties that we used for what we learned in Flexbox container. Container properties, for the alignment of items inside them, we have two basic properties. We have three actually for moving them. But the third one is mainly when you have more items which are on multiple lines. We don't have any, we just have one item. So we will just use justify content to move the item in the center on the main axis. And then we use align items to move the item in the center on the cross axis. So when everything cross and the main is in the center, we get the items exactly in the center of the page. Why do we get it in the center of the page? Because we have set the flex container as the viewport height. So I will move everything in the center of that container. And what is the container? The container is the wrapper. Okay. So now we have this. Now we have the align item center, justify content, display flex, and minimum height. So we are probably done with the wrapper. Now let's go in the form. So let's start with the form part of it, because form is the item, right? Form is the item. Now in the form, we are given some properties like the form, the width of the box is 300 pixels. There is some background given for the form, which we will probably copy here. And I'm going to write that over here. Background color, let's say hash, this one. And then I will say width of the form is 300 pixels. Okay. And you will start to see, let me save this, and we'll start to see some shape, right? We're still having some problems. We're still not fixed many things because it doesn't look like this, right? We still have to fix a few more things. We see that there is spaces between the left and the right. So we are going to add some padding to the overall, I guess, 30 pixels padding to all the sides so that we can see that the content is actually in the center somewhere. So we have some spaces from top, left, bottom, right. And now the other thing is we have to put all of this like username, the input area, everything one below the other. And all of these are actually items inside my form. If you look at this inside the form, H2, label, input, button, all of these are items inside my form. So if I make the form also a container, then all of these will become my items. So this is an important part. We will learn more of it in the next class in detail. We'll like try it many different levels. So the toughest exercise is going to come in the next class. But today I'm just giving you an example of what you can do. In Flex, you can have, let's say, for example, a container. All items inside them will become the items. Each item can also become a container for all the items inside it. So that is the power of Flexbox. You can take an item and then you can make it a container. And then you can go inside that item for each of the container, and then you can make it again a container. So you can do as many containers as you like. Okay. So whenever the items are on beside each other or floating, each of them can be a container. Each of them can be a container. So what we want to do is we want to make the form also a container so that all of this H2, label, input, all of them will become the items inside them. Okay. So let's go and do that. So the first thing, how to do that, how to make a container? Simple. We studied that the first thing that you have to initiate Flexbox is say display flex, and display flex will make it a container. Now you will see that everything will be one beside the other and they are messed up because, you know, by default, the flex direction is row, but we don't want row. We want one below the other. So what do? We go back and we change the flex direction. What is the flex direction we are looking for? We want it to be column so that they are one below the other. So now our thing is looking much better. I mean, we can see that I have got my shape. I have got everything in line. So now the next thing, so this was all about Flexbox. So this is what you did with Flexbox in this assignment. Now the other things that you will be doing is just styling, which is normal CSS. Okay, but we'll do that as well. So we got flex direction, we got the display flex, we got the padding, width, and the background color. Okay, so we are somewhere here. And then we want to start going inside and start to add more styles to each of the items inside them to make it look better, right? So what do we see different now? The first thing we can see is like, you know, the color of everything is white. So we can go ahead and say like put something in the wrapper or something in the body to make the font color always white by default. Okay, so that everything is white. The next thing we want to do is we want to style. Let's start one by one. Okay. So let's start is by styling based on whatever is given over here, or you can jump and start styling. So for example, if you want to start styling from top to bottom, let's do top to bottom. So let's say the first thing that doesn't look right is this one, right? There's a line over here, which is mentioned in one of the exercises that it is a small border on the left side of the H2. And that is 5 pixels in width and also has a padding of 10 pixels. So we have a left border, which is 5 pixels. So let's do that. So this is for H2, right? Because we have only one H2, I'm just going to write H2. And we have a left border, sorry, border left, border left, and we can use the shorthand property, which is 5 pixels, solid white. Okay, so this is what we have. If you look at it, this is what we have. And there is a padding because it's not stuck. See, there is a padding between the item and the border. So we go and add the padding over here and say padding. And this is also left because we only want padding for the left side, which is around 10 pixels, which is given to us. And then you can see that now it looks better. So this part is complete. This part from the top part is complete. I'm done with it. Now let's go down. And you can see that the text of this username and password is in capital letters. So username and password is written in capital letters. We cannot change the HTML because I told you in the exercise that you cannot change the HTML. So there is a property in CSS that allows you to do that. And that property is text transform. Okay, so we can do that without even. So let's go back and change the text to all capital. And this is done for the label. This is done for the label. And inside the label, I want to say text transform, say upper case. Okay, and you can see that both of them are capital now. Okay. Now, other things that we can see is like there is some spaces below this, like the top of the element. We have some spaces here at the, see, password is not stuck to the input box. So each label must have some like margin top, let's say 10 pixels. Okay. So some space, I think it is mentioned here, I'm not sure. Yeah, there is a space, so the margin top will be 10 pixels. We can also have, let's say, for example, some of the space in between the username and the element itself. You see the password and this one. So I'll go and use the input element, and then I will probably say margin top, say 10 pixels again, or 20 pixels, whatever, you can decide the space. Over here, it also has some space over here. We can do that as well. Or 10 looks very big. So I'll go for 5 pixels. Okay. And then we can see that one of the biggest difference right now I have is, see, the input box over here is not the default one. It is a little bit bigger. So, and it is mentioned there also over here. The input box is not the default one. It has a height for 20 pixels. Okay. So I can go and say here height 20 pixels, and I have the font size, because when I start typing, I don't want it to type small, so I want to type it bigger. So I'll say 20 pixels again, and then you can see that it's looking a little better. I can see things bigger. Okay. Now the only thing remaining, the last thing remaining, is my button. My button looks very different from what I have over here, right? So let's go down and add the button style. And in the button, I can see that the first thing I can see is the button has some space between the top part of the password. So I say margin top to be, let's say, 20 pixels. Okay. So some space is already added. And the button is a very different shape. It's a very different shape. The content of the button is very different. So I might add, let's say, for example, remove the background color. The background color is nothing. So there is a color called transparent that will allow you to make it transparent. You can see now the button became transparent. Now it still looks like a button. So you can, for example, change the style of this to make it look different by changing the display to inline block. Okay, and then it probably will not change. Let's add some padding to it. And let's say, I'm not sure what is the padding. Overall padding of 5 pixels. So I'll say 5 pixels. Okay, 5 pixel added. Okay, transparent. Has a border of 2 pixels. So I'll say border. Yeah, I don't need to display inline block, to be honest. So I'll say border, 2 pixels, solid white. Okay, so this will probably add the border that I was looking for. The text color is also different. So I'll say color as white. Okay, and then text transform because it's also bigger. So I can say uppercase. Okay, so now it's bigger. You can see this. I have a border radius around it. So I can go ahead and say border radius, and then it's given as 10 pixels, I think, or 15, I don't remember. Yeah, see the curve, which is 10 pixels. It's in the center already, so I don't need to do that. It's already mentioned in the instructions, but you don't need to do that. So I have the login button over here. And what else? It looks decent, right? It looks exactly what I want it to be. Maybe some spaces or the text size is a little bit bigger, so I can do that. So font size, let's say 20 pixels. I hope so. Yeah, I think it's not 20, it's 16 probably. 16 pixels. It's not given the instructions, but so again, you can customize it whatever you like, or you can make it smaller. Now the other thing was the last, when you hover over it, that it should change the color. The text color should change to white. The background color should be white, and the text color should be this. So how do we do that? It's simple. If you remember the pseudo class styles, we said button colon hover, and then we can say color of the text, I want to make it like this, and the background color, I want to make it as white. Okay, and you can see that this will be something like this. The button, when you click, the button doesn't change the pointer, right? So we can add a property. There's a property called cursor, I think, which is say pointer, so that it looks like a pointer. So when you go, you can see the finger over here. Because when you change the properties of the button will no longer act as a button. So you can change it to pointer by using the cursor as pointer. Again, it's not mentioned there, but again, this is just to show you that what you can do. And that's it. So you see, the main idea, the styling you can do as you like. You can move on. Like for example, I will give you a picture, you search for the style and you can find the style. Use the spacing also, you can adjust, you can see and adjust 5 pixel, 2 pixel, if it's very close, if it's very far away, you can adjust that based on your understanding. And the button also, once you got the idea of how to do that, you can adjust it based on how you can do that. The main concept over here is the alignment. Because this is a simple alignment. I just gave you an alignment of one item inside the box. That's it. Okay. But we are using one important concept that we learned from this exercise is that when you apply flex to something, you get an item inside it. You can make that item also a container, a flex container by using display flex on it. And then the items inside it will become flex items so that you can move them however you like. And that is what happened over here. So initially, we wanted the box to move in the center. To move that, we make the whole thing as a container, the wrapper as a container, and then we use justify content and justify and align items to move it in the center. Next thing we did was the item itself, we made it a container. And then when the item was the container, all of these inside it, the H2, the label, the input, and the button, all of them became items inside it. And then to move them one below the other, we just use what? Flex direction column. That's it. Okay. So this is how we use flex properties. Again, this is a simplified example. So in future, we will also learn in the next class, we will learn a more detailed example. We are going to learn some more properties today. And then based on that, you will learn how to do this. Okay.